Jean-Claude Van Damme in Bloodsport.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for another classic Jean-Claude Van Damme film. Today I'm taking a look at the 1988 classic action martial arts film Bloodsport. The film is directed by Newt Arnold and it stars, of course, Jean-Claude Van Damme as well as Donald Gibb, Leia Aries, Norman Burton, Forrest Whitaker, yes, Forrest Whitaker, and the legendary Bolo Yeung as Chong Li. Now, the film focuses on Frank Dux, played by Jean-Claude Van Damme. Now, we are treated at the beginning of the film to like a training montage, and essentially we learn that Jean-Claude Van Damme's character, Frank Dux, came over with his parents, settled in the US from outside, from another country, and he tries to steal like a sacred sword from a martial artist. He gets caught, and then this master, Tanaka, agrees to train him to give him some discipline. He then grows up. He joins the armed forces in some special area, and then he decides he's going to enter a special martial arts tournament in Hong Kong called the Kumite, to honour his master, as his master's son entered this tournament some years previously and died while competing in it. So he wants to honour his master. So he heads to Hong Kong to compete in the Kumite. While there, he faces against some of the world's most vicious fighters, and ends up with an inevitable confrontation with the current champion and the most brutal fighter there, Chong Li. Right. What are my thoughts on Bloodsport? Well, anybody that has heard of Jean-Claude Van Damme or knows anything about him and his movies has heard of the film Bloodsport. It was one of his earliest appearances. It's arguably the film that made him a star, I suppose, even though he had done a couple of things before this. And for me, it was absolutely part of my action film diet in the late 80s and 90s. It's one of those that I watched constantly, and I just absolutely loved it. And I've said it before. I just think that these sort of films that in the late 80s, sort of films that Cannon did and other things did, they were just so entertaining and fun to watch, and this was absolutely no exception. Now, it's a very, very simple story. He's going to Hong Kong to, honour his master and compete in the Kumite. And the film does a good job of building up this martial arts tournament, the Kumite, to be like, the world's top tournament, and people have died in it, and it's full contact, all that kind of stuff. So you do get treated to that, and you kind of think, oh, this is a a big event, and it's a dangerous event. I think in regards to what doesn't work in this film, I think you've got the two agents sent from the armed forces to chase after him, because he's essentially is a valuable tool for the US military, and they don't want him getting harmed or hurt. So they send these two agents after him to bring him back, and it's the Norman Hunter actor and Forrest Whitaker chasing him all over Hong Kong. And to be honest, the film just really didn't need it. I don't think. It just kind of feels like filler. The film only really is entertaining when you're actually in the arena and the fighting is starting and taking place. It is hugely entertaining at that point. They do give Jean-Claude Van Damme a bit of a romance to focus on in the film. There's like a reporter, Janice, I think she's called, who's desperate to learn more about the Kumite and the ins and outs of that tournament and how brutal it actually is. So there's kind of a bit of a romance blossoming with Jean-Claude Van Damme. Again, the film doesn't need it, but it doesn't spoil it either. I mean, even the two agents chasing Van Damme around Hong Kong doesn't spoil the film. It just kind of, when those moments happen, the romance stuff and the guys chasing Van Damme, all you're thinking is, when's the next fight taking place? And it's supposed to be set over like 3 days. They're all kind of fighting each other or through different rounds, that kind of stuff. And they do a good job, I think, as well, of building up a lot of these fighters to being very, very skilled, you know what I mean, and a real threat. And a really nice variation of different martial arts and different fighters throughout the world. And then you've got Donald Gibb, who is like this huge biker guy from America that's... I don't know, I mean, because she could only get an invite, apparently, to compete in the Kumite, so God knows how he got an invite. He doesn't do any martial arts in the film, he just batters them. And he and Jean-Claude Van Damme's character, Frank Dux, in the film become good friends. So it is really entertaining stuff. The fight choreography is excellent, and it's one of those films that you can really get behind. You know, it builds it up really well to the final battle between Frank Dux and Chong Li, the real villain, and Bolo Yeung. I think here plays one of the best villainous characters in a martial arts film. He does these roles so well, and you genuinely feel like he's a real threat throughout this whole film, because he just wants to win, and he doesn't mind if he kills people at the same time, sort of thing. There's a scene in this film where he kills one of the fighters, and he just doesn't care, basically. And I genuinely think the film does a really fantastic job of building up his character, and it gives everybody, I think, a lot of the fighters, their moments to shine, or their moments to show what they've got in regards to martial arts. But make no mistake, Jean-Claude Van Damme is the star of this film. He's young, he's fresh-faced. Yes, his acting's a little bit dodgy, but you have to forgive that. You've got to remember, English wasn't his second language. He probably wasn't still very good at speaking English at this point in his career, which is very evident when you watch the film. So some of it is, like I say, the language barrier, and some of it is his lack of experience in front of a camera. There's some scenes in the film that I don't think have particularly aged well. They're a little bit cringy, poorly made sort of thing, and I'm talking about like some of the flashback scenes. I mean, the actor they got to play Van Damme as a boy, I mean, couldn't they have done any better? I mean, he looks absolutely nothing like Van Damme. And, I'm being polite when I say the kid is not a very good actor, really. So, my understanding is as well, Michael Dudikoff was supposed to be in this film playing Frank Dux, but they decided instead to go with Van Damme. And Michael Dudikoff was a big actor for the Cannon films. He did the American Ninja films and things like that. Apparently as well, the video game Mortal Kombat, I think the first one came out in the early 90s. That video game was inspired by this film, and Johnny Cage, the character of Johnny Cage, was put in there, and that was supposed to be Van Damme, really, which I thought was really cool. And Frank Dux was the fight coordinator for this film, or choreographer. And he personally trained Van Damme for 3 months leading up to the film, or at least that's what the information says whenever we researched it. But let's talk about Frank Dux for a minute, because there is a lot of evidence out there now that much of the mythos surrounding Frank Dux is pretty much a lie. The fact that even if he competed and won any events, I think it's pretty much accepted, I believe now, that Frank Dux kind of lied his way into Hollywood, and I think there was a bit of a fallout with Van Damme later in Van Damme's career, in regards to writing credits on films. I'm not sure which films. So that is Bloodsport, really. A really top martial arts film. Very excited to watch. Great fight scenes. Simple watch, really, and definitely, if you've never checked it out, it's definitely a film you must watch if you like good old-fashioned, well-made martial arts films. So thanks for joining me, guys. I will, of course, be back with loads more reviews on the channel very soon.